Hello, and welcome to Web Relates. Today we're on the AskReddit subreddit. We're looking at something a little bit more serious today, where Obligation Plus has asked, what's something simple that can actually kill someone accidentally that isn't common knowledge? Reddit user 8018 says, people don't realize that a lot of people who die in house fires die in their sleep. The fire is too small to wake them from the heat alone, or it's further away. Yet it is releasing carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, along with a ton of other toxic fumes, into the air. You are just sleeping and breathing in that gas, which makes you even more tired and eventually completely unconscious, then dead. The Black Shell says, being shoved. Seen too many videos of fights or scuffles where someone is shoved or punched, and they trip on concrete and suffer fatal traumatic brain injuries, hitting their head on concrete. The brain is fragile. Protect it. SS Todd has replied with an interesting, if not completely related story. One of my friends was mucking around with me at school, kind of play fighting, and tripped me over. I hit my head on the concrete, and I have two vague memories after falling of being walked through the hallways supported by someone, then appearing in the nurse's office. I was proper concussed by the incident, and had a routine CT scan to check for brain injury. That was fine, but they inadvertently found an arachnoid cyst which was 13 centimeters long, taking up about a third of my skull, pushing my brain to the side. To briefly explain what that is, your brain is surrounded by a membrane, and in between that membrane and your brain is called the subarachnoid space. Cerebrospinal fluid goes through fluid pathways in that space to coat your brain. Due to a defect that was likely there since birth, one of the fluid pathways had a dead end, and from the natural circulation of cerebrospinal fluid, this was extremely slowly filling up that part of the membrane like a water balloon. Your brain is actually extremely compressible, like a sponge, with no bad effects to a certain point if it happens slowly enough. I likely would not have detected the cyst until eventually starting to get really bad migraines, or more serious symptoms a lot later in life. Had an operation to have an internal tube installed that now drains the cyst like an IV drip into my abdominal cavity. Since cerebrospinal fluid is basically just saline, it just gets harmlessly absorbed by the tissue there. Daft Funk says, a high-pressure puncture wound or high-pressure injections. Imagine you're wearing all of your PPE, got your goggles, your gloves, etc., and you're working with high-pressure liquids. I'm not talking about cutting steel with water jets, just something with high enough pressure that can pierce or puncture the skin. And bang, you get a little stab from a pressurized fluid source, not even bleeding that much, if at all. Sometimes it's just a little sting. But you go to medical and get the assistance, and after a day, your hand is sore but otherwise fine. If you obtain one of these injuries and don't alert the medical staff, you typically lose the limb. It can be just as bad with water or steam as with chemicals. This was a safety moment at my company due to a mechanic getting a pinprick while changing a line. While he went for medical help, he didn't tell them it was a high-pressure wound. As such, he progressively lost 3 fingers on his hand because the substances were blasted into muscle tissues and caused necrosis, slowly. Bryrod has replied, not fluids, but I had a teacher in the union who had a nail in his brain. He was an elevator worker and shooting very, very thin nails into the shaft to reinforce certain parts. He said one sparked, and he thought nothing of it. When he came up, his buddy noticed a tiny hole and crack in his glasses, and told him he needs to get it checked out. Teacher insisted he probably just dropped them earlier, but the co-worker made him go to the ER. And of course, they found a 3-inch nail in his brain and couldn't remove it. It's a miracle it never affected him or anything. He was the one that got me to buy S&W ballistic safety glasses that can stop a .22 mag. Wear them every day. Next we have 2 small but related comments. Fuchs says, a dental infection. I went to grief support meetings and a woman there lost her son to an impacted tooth that spread infection to his brain. And Baker's Mensch says, an abscessed tooth. Lost a friend who just figured it was a regular toothache. The infection made its way into his bloodstream, and that was it. Suspiciously Moist says, confined spaces. If it only has one way in and out, especially if it's below ground, there is a very real possibility that there isn't enough oxygen in there to support life. Even something as simple as rusting metal can remove the oxygen from the air, and if there isn't airflow going through the space, the oxygen-depleted air won't be replaced. Other processes can remove oxygen or produce actively toxic gases. This sort of thing often kills more than one person, as the first person to find the victim goes in to rescue them and becomes the second victim. And as excellently pointed out by Corncrank, if it's just lack of oxygen, you won't notice. You'll just fall unconscious. Too much carbon dioxide is noticed by your body, but a lack of oxygen is not. Dr. X says rags covered in linseed oil can spontaneously combust when left in a pile. I randomly discovered this fact in a Reddit post titled, "The New Guy Burned Down Our Workshop." A carpenter I know confirmed that this is a real thing. I've been getting into refinishing old furniture, so I'm glad I learned this now. You'd think it'd be more common knowledge. I actually went and tried to find this post, but I was not successful. I did, however, find several confirmed reports of the same phenomenon on the r/woodworking subreddit. Def Toner comes in with a terrifying one. A cracked toilet. Even if it isn't leaking or doesn't seem like it's a problem, replace it immediately. Do not sit on it. If it breaks while you're doing your business, that crap will slice your leg/butt meat open like a razor. Broken porcelain is no joke, especially when you put all of your weight on it. Finally, J. King says, if you see somebody on the ground who has had an accident, do not move them unless you have to. They could have a spinal injury. This is especially true about motorcyclists. Leave their helmet on. That helmet could be the only thing keeping their skull together at that moment. If you remove it, they can die. And for God's sake, if you see someone bleeding profusely and you can't get it to stop, reach for the tourniquet. But also, don't take that tourniquet off unless you were a licensed medical practitioner. And write the time. It's not super critical that you write the time, but allows the doctors to know how long the tourniquet's been on, and if they're going to need special practices to filter the blood before they release the tourniquet. Okay guys, that's it for today. Some interesting factoids there. I know it was a little bit of a short one, but thanks for watching. So until the next video, I'll see you there. Cheers.